The Internet of Production Alliance is a group of organizations that are interested in trying to build a new paradigm of production to complement mass production. At the core of it is the idea of distributed manufacturing, but a key part of that is distributed not in terms of vertical, but in terms of true networks. And one of the ways that that is enabled is through standards for networks to collaborate together, manufacturing networks to collaborate together. And one of our standards that got started back in 2018 was called Open Know-how. And it's an open standard for the discoverability, the portability, and the interactivity of know-how, of designs and documentation. You've probably heard of open data, or you may have heard of open knowledge, open educational resources. Open know-how is about trying to share tacit knowledge. It's about trying to share how things can be made. And an enormous part of our community, huge part of our community, from the open hardware movement. And the one of the the leaders, the shining lights of that, of the open hardware movement globally, I would say, is Open-Source Ecology Germany. So I'm delighted that we've got the team from Open-Source Ecology Germany to present to us today. So I think we'll get started now. That's a little bit of framing, and I'll talk a little bit more about open know-how as we get into the topic of today's call, which is about announcing some new tools for ontology-based distributed hardware search based on the Open Know-how standard. The sponsor for the project is a European initiative called Next Generation Internet, and they have a particular program of activity around improving search. So the NGI search program is what has supported the work that you're going to be hearing about today in the main presentation. But first, let me dive in to some updates about the Internet of Production. I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been up to, and well, some things that have been going on with the Alliance. We take these community calls as an opportunity to keep everyone informed and up to date. So a big part of what we did in 2024 and for the start of 2025 was work with makerspaces. And we had two big projects. One was called the Make Project, which is a 3-year European Union funded project to bring together makerspaces in Africa and in Europe to form networks. The European phrase is just digital innovation hubs. And we wanted to create networks of makerspaces as digital innovation hubs across Africa and Europe to enable distributed manufacturing. If you go to that web address, makeafricaeu.org, that now has an enormous collection of resources that you can look at. You've got, and it's aimed at makerspace managers, but you've got materials on business models for makerspaces, on advising members of makerspaces on how to set up companies, on the management of makerspaces, on fundraising for makerspaces, a common policy agenda for makerspaces across the 2 continents. So a huge range of resources in there. The second project was called Innovative Manufacturing in Africa, and that project looked at 9 makerspaces in Africa, particularly in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. And we developed a series of initiatives and capacity building programs, some of which we've covered on previous community calls. Those, the training that we delivered to the makerspace managers in that program is now all available through the Make Project website and the MOOC course that they have. So there's online courses in market dialogues or business model implementation or fundraising that you can look at there. Now, we see makerspaces as part of a hub, as hubs for distributed manufacturing networks, and they have an important role in the future, and they've been a big part of what we've been doing, but not everything we do. It's my hay fever again. Okay. Some other updates from the Internet Production Alliance. Those two projects have come to an end, so I want to say a huge thank you to the team that worked on those two projects. Anna worked on business model catalog. Antonio did some incredible work with the Open Know-how standard for the geographic location of machines and the maps that we have. Benita managed the Innovative Manufacturing in Africa project. Jessica managed the Make project. Rebecca did a lot of the communications, the documentation of the materials, the learning materials for makerspaces. Sarah worked on the standard that we have now for people and skills, but also the Maker Passport system. And Barry, Dan, Neve, Steve, Sue, and Vicky were all helping us as fundraisers or with our communications to try and develop concepts for projects and funding bids for the Internet Production Alliance. And we're still waiting to hear from quite a few of those in 2025. They've all now finished their work with the Alliance, but we're still in touch. I see them and speak to them regularly, and we're hoping to be able to bring them back again as new projects come in and as projects allow. So at the moment, Max and I are the two active people working on the Internet of Production, and we're sort of maintaining the systems that have been developed, but also I'm developing new concepts, writing up some of the work we've done, and doing more fundraising. Right, let's deal with my hay fever again. Sorry.
Andrew, I can help you with that offline, so ping me after this one.
I need all the help I can get, Victoria. Thank you.
Yeah.
Community contributions to the problem of hay fever would be helpful. Right. It's a busy time this time of year for events, and I'm really pleased that we're able to attend quite a few of them in the next few weeks. Literally in the next few weeks. So next week, there's the International Association for the Study of the Commons conference, and they've been partners of ours on some funding bids, on developing some ideas around the manufacturing commons. So I'll be attending that for the first couple of days in Massachusetts. The UN Open Source Week is taking place next week as well at the United Nations in New York, and we will be promoting the idea of open hardware at that event for the first time. Fab 25 Mexico, Fab 25 Czechia is going to be in Brno and Prague in July. And actually very relevant to today's call is that we're going to be presenting some of the work that the team have developed that you'll be hearing about today at the Next Generation Internet Forum in Brussels, which brings together an enormous range of people, including from within this community, working to create a better internet. So with that, I'm going to have to blow my nose again. The brief that we, when the Next Generation Search call came out, the brief description of the project that the team wrote was to establish a revolutionary hardware design search ecosystem that leverages the Open Know-how standard to vastly improve the autonomy, discoverability, and comparability of hardware designs. And that is essentially what you're going to be hearing about today. Open Know-how Discoverability tries to improve the discoverability of designs and documentation for hardware products on the internet. And the process began in 2018. The first standard was launched in 2019. Some of you were involved in that. Thank you for being here today. But since then, a number of platforms have adopted it. A number of the manifest files have been created for people to use. But now we're having to develop new tools to actually make the discoverability part happen. And I am incredibly grateful to the team at Open-Source Ecology Germany for taking on this task. I know they've been supported by others, such as Marion O'Grady, who I believe is known by Public Invention Lab, in this process as well. So our speakers today are from Open Source Ecology, Robin, Peter, and Tim. I think Robin might be doing most of the talking, but presenting some of the work. And I want to take a moment to thank the Next Generation Internet Search Program for supporting this project. So, Robin, it's over to you if you want to start sharing your screen, please. And thanks for doing this today.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's see. Can you see it, my screen?
Yeah, very clearly. Thank you.
Okay, good. So I'll move this one over here and okay. This. Okay. Can you read this well?
Yes, and the boxes at the side are part of artifacts from the Zoom call, so that we can't really hide those any further, I'm afraid, everyone, but hopefully you can see the screen properly. Fire away, Robin. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so hello, everyone. So for those who don't know me, I'm a very abstract technical guy, so I might get lost in details. Yeah, feel free to bring me back if that happens. So this is a graphic we did for during this funding project also that shows basically everything around open know-how and a bit more also what is connected. The upper part here is something that's probably not going to be much of interest for people here. So we'll be looking at this one mainly today, this part. So yeah, it's about metadata of open source hardware projects. And we want, basically we want to get as like many of the ones that are available in the internet and get their data, put them in a common format, in our standard format, and put them in a database that then can be accessed by everyone. Yeah, that's the idea. And this one shows more or less how we do it. So yeah, it goes from top to bottom. So there are hardware projects hosted on different platforms, for example, yeah, GitHub, GitLab, Apropedia, and well, OSHA doesn't really host them, but it does index them. And there are developers that create that manually create manifest files, in our case that are TOML files, which contains basically data we want in our standard for each project. But many of the projects that are in our database, they don't have people that create such files for them, but we create the files basically automatically on the fly from the APIs of these hosting platforms. Yeah, so then we somehow get to them. That's the scraper. We have a software that does that. And so then we have these TOML files. TOML is a format similar. Basically, it has the same capabilities as has YAML or JSON. It's just, it looks different, but it's basically the same, and all of them can be converted into each other easily. And what we do then is convert it to RDF, which is the linked data format. That, well, it would be too much for this talk to explain why exactly, or I mean, what all the benefits of RDF. It's also, if you don't know it, it's probably, it's kind of hard to imagine, but well, it will, it makes the data more interlinkable, more compatible with other data, let's say like this. And all by itself, that's for now not so interesting. But as we already heard from Andrew, there are other standards, even by our own group, but there could be from other groups also. In our case, so while OKH is about the metadata of hardware projects, we also have metadata of, that we have Open Know-how, which is metadata about locations that can be used for manufacturing. And we have a standard for skills of people, and well, like skills like manufacturing, specific kinds of manufacturing. And you can probably see how it makes sense to interlink them, so that, for example, the metadata of a hardware project contains a list of skills that are required to build it, and maybe a list of machines that are required to build it. And then the standard for the manufacturing locations, of course, also contains a list of machines that are available at this location, and then they can be matched up. And for linked data, basically allows that to define the standards, like the machine readable and human readable format of all this data to be compatible with each other, so that, yeah, that these things can, even though they're developed separately, more or less, they can work together well. That's the idea, and that's where we want to go to get to. But yeah, that's the goal, and that's why we do that. Yeah, so here we have a scraper. That's a software that runs, and we designed our system in a way that we can run multiple scrapers, and they collect data. Then after collecting the data, they share it with each other, and so that everyone has all the data. And then there can be different hostings. So each location or each server that scrapes could also host, or the hosting could happen elsewhere, but there could be multiple hostings of the data. It could be all the data in each case, or maybe one place only is interested in medical hardware and only wants to host this. So it's very flexible in itself. And this data, this hosted data, can then be accessed in its raw form, basically through queries. In this case, that's not SQL queries, but Sparkle queries, but it's a very similar thing. And or it could be accessed through a web interface that accesses the data through these queries, but makes it available to end users in a well, in a much more palpable format, let's say, just using a website. Yeah. Well, there's much more detail here, but I might leave it at that, and you can ask more questions later on. For those who already know OKH, I will now go into the details. So the details are changed in this funding project. So that would be it would be since November, more or less, until now. So yeah, it's more complex now than before. And in general, it's already more complex than the original standard. And that is, of course, in itself not good, but we think it's necessary. It's a side effect, and we have to mitigate it and find ways like such web interfaces that I just talked about to make it still more accessible. And we need lots of tooling around the formats, like especially the ontologies, to make it easier for people to work on it together. Yeah. But why are we doing it? Well, I already said the interlinkedness of these standards. We think it's going to bring, well, the overall goal of Open-Source Ecology Germany, but I think of many of us in general also, is to basically replace the current economy, and especially, well, in our case, regarding hardware or technology, if you want, is to make it basically to give power to the people over their machines and to make it distributed. Yeah, to make it distributed. And we think for this to happen, it needs to be efficient. And we believe that's only possible through standards. And if we get there, we also believe that it's basically certain that it will be better than what the industry comes up with, because an efficiently linked together network of all the people that want to work together will be bigger and more efficient than the companies, because it only needs to be bigger than the biggest company, not bigger than all the companies together, because they work against each other while we work together. And well, yeah, you get the idea. But without standards, it's not going to work. That's what we believe. And it's going to be a long and hard way to get there. And we probably do many things wrong, but well, someone has to do it and learn the things that need to be learned. Yeah, that's about the general idea. So what changed since the last time? So in the last time we scraped data that was in the OpenX project, there was someone in 2022 or even before, I'm not sure. And we had about 35,000 projects. And by now we have already around 1 million projects. I have to say that in both cases, most of these projects are from Thingiverse. And but it's a number that's true. That's the case. Yeah. So one important thing, of course, is where we find these projects, and that's the scraping sources. We don't scrape GitHub anymore because it was never really working anyway, because they don't want it to work. We don't do Wikifactory anymore because, well, it never worked, but we wanted to use it, but now we gave it up for good because they removed their API. We kept Appropedia, Oshwa, and Thingiverse. Appropedia is very closely working together with us, thanks here to Emilio and Felipe. Oshwa, we didn't really need direct help from them, but we are also in contact with them, and they're sympathetic, and we have other collaborations with them. And Thingiverse is basically the only commercial platform we found ever that's kind of lends itself to scraping, which I mean, they don't. It's not like they want it, but due to their system of using IDs for projects that start at 1 and just count upwards for each new project added, it's possible to scrape to some extent. So that's why we have them, and that's why we can boast a lot of data, which I think is good for marketing reasons at least. In the long run, of course, we should have more data from other sources, but for now, that's it's nice to have. And thanks here to all the people who helped scraping. That was a real world example, and we actually did scrape it in a distributed manner. So I think we had 5 people helping. Each one of them scraped a part of the ID space of Thingiverse. By now, they kind of understood what we are doing, and they're blocking us very fast. But we got to have, I would say, about 80% of their data. Only the metadata, I must say. Yeah, new sources are manifest repos. That's one example that Myron O'Grady from Public Inventions, employed by Robert Reed, handcrafted. I don't know how many right now, but I think it's well over 100 manifests, OKH manifests that she handcrafted for medical hardware. Big thanks to her. And so it's basically just the Git repository that the scraper gets and just ingests all the manifest files that are there. Then another source that's very new is the manifests list. That's what Casper used for his search. He kind of invented it, if you want so, and it's a recursive set of lists. So it's a list that contains manifests and links to other lists, which again can contain links to other lists. And yeah, here you see some that we considered, but in the end ended up not using because, yeah, as you see, the reason is written here. Basically, there's no, in my findings, there's no commercial hosting platform that has an interest in sharing even their metadata. And the newer they are, the more impossible it is to get to their data. What else changed? So images before were just links. Now they have also tags and slots, which is something similar to tags, but only one image can be in a slot at most per project. So these are things like the main logo or the main photo, which are, this is again metadata about images. That's important to have if you want to make for example, a shop that contains open source hardware projects. You want to show an image, and if a project has many images, you need to know which one is meant to be shown in a shop, for example. And they can have captions, so that would be text to show alongside the image, or that explains what's seen on the image. Other changes is that all our ontologies now have perma URLs. That makes them much more compatible with the future, let's say. And they're following best practices. We learned a lot here from the people from LOF, the library of Open Ontology? No, Library of Vocabularies, I think. Or linked open vocabulary. Well, it's a website that shows that collects ontologies, so that are metadata standards, and makes them searchable. And yeah, we are in direct contact with them, especially Peter, and we're also developing software together with them to improve ontologies, which are like the schemas for distributed data standards, or that's at least what we use. Yeah, so part of following these best standards is the OnProx software that we wrote, and another other things is, for example, OOPS, which is a linter for ontologies. That's what Peter is working on a lot. And lots of small things changed. Most of the work was in maintaining, changing, and that's just lots of work on the crawler, which is also at the same time work on the data, because data in the internet is messy, and to try to get it in a clean format that is the same no matter from which source it comes, that's a lot of work. And yeah. And another change, probably the most important for all of you, is that now we have a permanent server. Before we had a very outdated hosting that was connected to a funding project, and it was not possible to update it. Now we, who are the main people working on the standard, have a server, and we are interested to give other people access if they are interested to work on it. And this server is we guarantee to keep the server on for 10 years, as long as one of us is alive or something like that. And we have the funding for that also. This server, well, I think Timm is going to talk more about it in the end. Learning, so yeah, it's basically this is just lots of rambling about how hard it is to get all this data and keep it up to date and make things not crash, and basically work on the crawler. What are some of the more interesting things? Yeah, we need to clean the data. Of course, there's lots of different properties from these different platforms. So not all the data that one platform provides is available in another platform. So we cannot use all the data that's available because, well, nah, I said it wrong. I didn't say that right. Basically, we need to find a way to put to get to a schema that can express all this data, or as much of the data as possible, in a uniform way, so that if one platform expresses similar data in a different way, in our schema, it would have to be in the exact same format as on other platforms. And that's difficult, and lots of decisions have to be taken. That can be hard. Also, yeah, one of the big problems that we still need to solve is identification. I will talk about this in a minute. Another thing is that was a lot of work in the early years, and right now we seem to be on a good track, is to try to get people to work on the same standard instead of everyone doing their own standard, which of course doesn't work. And naming things is hard, and we are in a constant fight with that. Naming things is hard in IT in general, but when doing a standard, it's exceptionally hard because it's basically the most important thing. Because if you name things unwisely, people will not understand it, they will not find it, it will be misinterpreted, even by yourself in a later moment. So yeah, that's a hard thing. Outlook, what do we plan to do? We want to update the IOPA website with
Robin, can I jump
yeah.
in for a second? Maybe it would be good to get a little bit into the questions that were there before we dive into the Outlook, because
Okay, yeah.
It's actually the fun part for the Outlook now. You described the hard part as well, but I think there's such a big potential with this. So
Yes.
it would be nice.
Okay, let's go to questions.
Yeah, so for 1 second, maybe you can put the graphic up again, the upper graphic that we had. Yeah. So by the way, let me check if I already have it in current. Yeah. There's a current website that we are hosting on Codeberg. I think it helps pointing at those repositories who are connected to this whole ecosystem here. And I would like to address a few questions, or at least point at them, and you might answer them, Robin, that appeared in the chat. Okay. So I think the first confusion, or at least questions, arise when you said that there's no scraping GitHub. So basically, because most of the open source hardware projects, at least, are
okay. I can say something to that.
Yeah.
So we're not scraping GitHub. That's because, I mean, scraping GitHub would mean you go to GitHub and you try to get the project from there. That is basically not possible because they don't want it to be possible. What is possible is to have a list of URLs that point to projects that are hosted on GitHub and then scrape the data from there. But yeah.
So we are basically talking about crowdsourcing those, right? It's probably the more valuable option than asking GitHub to share the metadata or implementing OKH in general. So I think that clarifies at least a few questions here that were here. If somebody has another question related to that, please just raise your voice. I think that's the easiest way, instead of me reading through all the chats. Yeah. Also,
thought on the oh, sorry, Tim. As a thought on the GitHub thing, have you thought of writing an action so somebody can literally push to you rather than you crawling GitHub? Because rather than having to, like, if somebody makes a change or creates a repository that has a manifest, trying to actually remember to go and update some file compared to having an action inside the repository so it just pushes. And at least with GitHub Actions, you just say, hey, do you want to be listed? Install this action, and it's sort of a one-click install.
That's a good idea.
I fully support that, because there are so many open source projects on GitHub that I'm constantly discovering every day. And if you know, the open source community is very passionate on GitHub. So if there's an action that flags them to push towards this, it would be extremely ideal.
I mean, that's a good idea. We should have that. And I'm not sure exactly how we should do it, but one way that's already, I mean, the easiest way I would say to do that is we already have the thing that I said that Casper invented, these recursive lists. So basically, if you have a GitHub action that can write the URL to your manifest or your project into a list, into a file, then you just have to make sure that that file, that list, is somehow in the tree of lists. So I think that's a very flexible and quite possible, quite accessible way. Probably even the best we could come up with. We still would have, it would still be nice to have this action, but it can even be like a one-liner bash script with some additional CI stuff. Yeah.
Thanks, Julian and Victoria, for those comments. Robert has his hand up, and then we go to Martin Hauer, please. Thanks, Tim, for prompting this discussion. Robert.
Well, the thing that's most interesting to me about this is, when is it going to be live, right? I mean, the Loesch library is semi-effective already, and it's possible that this will be better, but in a perfect world, you make something live and then you slowly improve it, right? And my understanding is this is not currently live, and that's really a major limitation.
I would say wait for the Easter egg towards the end. We have something in line prepared for you.
Okay, good.
I think it's reasonable enough to understand the whereabouts that Robin describes. Is more technical. Understand? We will probably also have a second call announced towards the end of June, where we dive deeper into the tech backend for the ones interested. I'll definitely showcase a few things that we have in the pipeline right now. Okay, just bear with me towards this. So from now, it's really about the question: where does the data come from, and how do we process this as best as possible, right? How to gain access to the information basically in a way that it's structured and linkable. So, and I must say that Robin kind of scrolled over the, I think, most intense work of his. Maybe you do me a favor and scroll a little bit up on your screen so we can see the graphics above, because the magic behind organizing the data is in the end a really good way of developing ontologies in this case, right? And the work within the project that we are running, I'll only scratch this on the surface, right? Because it goes into much detail here, is really to find tools that help you develop this ontology in a.
But let's not talk about this here. I mean,
I'm just, hey,
we're
Robin, I'm just saying it is.
What we don't have to explain ourselves what we were doing with our time or so.
I think if you look at the repositories listed on the website I shared.
But let's go into more questions now, Tim. I don't want to talk about this. Please, Martin.
Yeah, I think the point has been made. And yeah, thanks for that. Also, very much looking forward towards the Easter egg then. Just a quick comment regarding the recursive repositories. It kind of reminds me on the Zenodo situation, where you can link a GitHub repository to Zenodo. So every time you have a new release, Zenodo automatically pulls the data and creates a DOI that other people then can quote or cite. And so there seems to be a way to crawl this data from GitHub's API. And I think it was like, I'm thinking back in time, I think that also was possible for certain links. So when people register that they want their data to be pulled, if you send these individual requests to the GitHub API, it's not so much of an issue. It just becomes an issue if you try to ask GitHub, the entire GitHub, for certain manifest files, and then gives that back. So maybe there could be something like a single button from the server where this data is being crawled to, and then this linking is established in a similar way.
Yes, once you know about the project, then you can go there and ask whether there's an update from time to time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the discussion. Let's go on to the outlook then. And I think Tim's keen to use some of the time to respond to what Robert was asking as well, I think.
Yes. Okay, outlook. So yeah, we want to update the IOPA website with the OKH references there. Then we need to solve the identification problem, which means how do we identify a project? That's kind of hard because mostly people think of it just as the URL, but a URL to what? I mean, a project can have mirrors on GitHub and GitLab. There are clones, there are forks, are forks the same project, yes or no? To what extent? How do we identify that? There are also sites where the project is hosted, but they don't identify it. They shouldn't be used as identifiers for the project. Then project could move from all the sites it was on to a whole set of different sites, and it would still be the same project. I mean, it's a difficult problem, and I think as I see it right now, there will probably not be any way to around projects having to define some of this data by hand if they are more complex kind of projects. But we have to make basically define how this should be defined, yeah, by them. Then about BOM data. Right now, BOM data for us is still mostly just a link to a file, and we don't look at what's inside it. With helpful engineering, we already promised them, and we are planning to do this hopefully soon, to atomize them, which means to basically also include the items in the BOM. But for that to work, we need a standardized format for BOMs, and there's not really an accepted open standardized format for BOM data. So we kind of initiated something, but it needs to be continued, and then we can link to it and thus include this data, and then try to parse the BOMs that we are finding. Naming things, as I said, we need to continue with that. That's a whole lot of project, a whole other project that I'm working on with Lynn Foster from Value Flows. It's really nice to work on this with her. She's great in this, and we already got quite some things done. Later you can check out the link if you're interested in this, and we're always interested in help. So, but what does that mean, naming things? Like what, for example, an open source hardware project, should we really call it open source hardware, a project, or should it be a design project? Or is hardware really the right word? Because we also want to include textiles. They're not really hard, you know. Isn't hardware that stuff that you buy in a hardware store? Or some people think of hardware as being electronics only. That's just one example, but there are many, many things in the whole ecosystem that one has to think well about how to name them. Then another thing is we have to check out LinkML, which is an alternative format. Well, it's kind of a mother format for distributed data that comes from the bio research community. It looks very promising, and it could solve some of the big problems we have, especially the single source of truth. It could provide us with a solution for that. The problem with the single source of truth thing is that we need our standards in different formats, and so far we don't have a way to automatically convert these formats into each other. So there's lots of handcrafting involved, which is time consuming and error thrown, really not good. And it seems they have solved that. A big project is to make the scraper production ready, which in my eyes means we also need to move away from Python because well, okay, I will not go further into this. For performance reasons, it's very slow at the moment. Maybe I could show you. It should be here. So this is the crawler running through Thingiverse projects. This is doing local work only. And still it's very slow, as you can see. It's like it can process 3 projects per second or so. It's just completely unacceptable. Yeah, then bigger questions like, are standards really the solution? you might think we should just take this for granted by all the work we already put into it, but I don't think we should, and I don't. So we want to discuss about that. Discuss this also, and there's a link to an issue to discuss this. Yeah. Well, okay. This is even further up into the skies. Let's say, like, how could we improve access to such standards for less technical people? Yeah, I think that's it. So I'll let Tim take over, or maybe if there are questions.
Well, should we go to Tim first, and then we'll see if Peter wants to add anything, because I know, Peter, you've been working hard on this project as well. But yeah, over to you, Tim.
Yeah. Quick question. Okay, how can I switch here now?
I have to turn
the
off
link to the pet. Is that fine, Robin? If I share the link to the document?
Yeah.
It makes things a bit easier for you guys to click on the things Robin mentioned.
Okay.
So apart from let's say the technical development, which is going to be continued even after the project ends and so on, and you can see all the repositories linked to them if you're more into the tech part, I think it's important to see what comes out there, right? So let me just hop right over to, where do I share my screen? 1 second. Here we go. Let's jump in here. All right, so website here. So let's jump into our, let's say, demo mockup we already created for this presentation. It's under heavy development right now towards the end of June, basically, and then we are ready to share it in the wider open. And it, I mean, you can already test it if you want, but it's really an early stage. So let me, for example, enter Loom here, and then I show you around, okay? So bear with me. So basically, before I start, you have the option to filter already. And this is basically searching through the linked data, right? So you can either go into description name, you can search for a specific license, author, language, specific releases, or the technical readiness or documentation readiness. Again, this is a very rough one, but it already enables us to search through the linked data. And we have currently limited everything to about 100 projects. Also, that's just temporarily to give us a bit more time, making the whole search a bit faster. But right now, you can already see all those finds. And as Robin mentioned, the index has increased a lot, so you can find a lot of projects already. Let me just randomly pick one here, which might be interesting, and then I can show you around what's planned, okay, so that you have at least an idea where we're heading right now. So the idea is to have a possibility to, of course, link to the source of it. You can export RDF link data. You then have the possibility also to download the manifest file to further improve it. And then, or you add it to your project repository, so which would, of course, be the cleanest way of doing it. But nevertheless, currently we scrape the data. And in the future, in best case scenario, most of the projects that are mostly relevant to our network, at least, add their own metadata. One addition here, and then I think I start with opening up for questions, is really that we also want to provide a way to create your manifest file in a bit smoother way. I know there were 2 approaches in the past. They need to be adapted to the current version of the OKH standard. And then this would be, of course, a bit nicer way of dealing with this. Yeah, so, and of course, this is just a demo for here. I'll share the link with you, and then you can give it yourself a shot with any search term that comes to mind. I mean, I like to use wind turbine, for example, or something like that, more complex, so that you have at least an idea of where we're heading right now. And I would say before I search any other, it would be nice to get some questions from you on this. By the way, you also have the option to exclude Thingiverse data because, like, again, most of the data, the small stuff, is from Thingiverse. But in some cases, it might be nice to exclude that. So let me share that.
Before we go to the questions, and I see Victoria's got her hand up, is there anything you want to add, Peter, from your work on this project? Anything that you'd like to emphasize? I know documentation has been a passion of yours for a while.
No, so not really. Perhaps I can say something very briefly about this linked data. So indeed, the technical details are not so important, but the idea is, and this is a common trend in search engines, is that you start using the internet as basically a database. So now if we browse to some page, all the data that is presented is for humans to read, and the linked data is more about making it searchable for computers, and this gives huge possibilities. And research in this has been going on for very long, but yeah, my point is the technical details, as Robin says, are not that important, but the underlying technology and the idea behind it is, I think, very important. And this ontology thing allows you to give meaning to the things that a computer finds on the internet, and that makes it interlinkable. And I think that is a very important technology.
Thanks for saying, Peter. So really huge thank you to Robin, to Timm, and to Peter for not only presenting their work on this project for the last few months that they've been working on this, but also for the work itself and for taking Open Know-how forward and some changes to the standard. We're going to go to Victoria, who's got her hand up for a question as we do some Q&A, but we're at the top of the hour now. I quickly want to say that today's call has been recorded. If you have any objection to us sharing the recording on our YouTube channel, where we normally save our community calls, please let me know. Get in touch. My email is in the chat, and I'll see if we can work something out to make, if you don't want to be included in the video. But yeah, my colleague Max, who is essentially our technical coordinator for the Alliance, wasn't able to attend today, but he will be presenting this project representing this project at the NGI forum in Brussels. So the video will definitely be shared with him. And his experience, I think, with the rest of what the Internet of Production's been doing, will begin to make some of that linked data benefit come to life, as you were saying, Peter. So let's go quickly to Victoria for a question, please.
For people who don't know, I'm the curator for the Open Source Medical Supplies Project Library. So my focus is always open source medical hardware. And is there any way, this perhaps could only be done manually, but as you're pulling in these enormous data dumps, is there any way to filter them by type? Put tags on medical. I don't know if that's possible without a human doing it, but some people may come to this UX and they're looking for something specifically medical, and they need to scroll through 10 pages of things that are not in order to find that design.
Yeah, that's the only way we have right now is to filter by type is through the CPC field. CPC stands for, well, that's Martin. That was Martin's idea, yeah. CPC is basically the patent identification ID, and that says what field and subfield and subfield some technology is in. That's
Okay.
of course for normal people that's not very practical, and we want to include other something like you, just like medical, but that's again another standard for what should this standard needs to be defined, and that's hard work, and you really can't. I mean, I can't do that. Well,
Okay.
at some point
Well,
we
that
can do it, but it has to be done.
yeah, it could be a sub project or something, because what happens in the research world is you have all these little universities or international projects that are essentially working on the same type of thing, and they don't know that 3 other people have already created this open source project, so they start another one. So increasing the discoverability of open source hardware for research and medical purposes, I think is public health, is extremely advantageous. Touching on hardware X, and we don't need to go down this rabbit hole, but I would really encourage us to find a way, maybe using Julian's idea, to include hardware X, because it's a publication. Of course, it's going to use a PDF to make sure its information is not changeable. It has, it has to be peer reviewed, and it has to stay in a certain format. So I really would hope that there's a way to develop a relationship with Hardware X, because that is, like, I believe one of our lead, if not the lead, open source hardware publications we have, and it has enormous data quality to provide here.
At least in terms of metadata, but not necessarily pointing at data that's actually open.
Well, and not to criticize, but this is something that happens a lot in open source world, that there's a purism which prevents more open source or open source adjacent research, information, ideas from being discovered. And OSMS doesn't have that purity. Like some of the projects in our library are licensed, some are not, because guess what? There's a lot of people producing open source data that don't know what open source means. They're just sharing. And this global approach to this data is what helps us increase our user base and our partnerships. So again, I would hope that there's a solution for a Hardware X partnership here.
Thanks for that, and for the thumbs up as well, Robert. Did you want to respond to that, or can we go to Martin, please? Martin.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. So in short, since I was also involved in the large project, so in Open Know-how and things, so my understanding, if the data is provided, there is a way to filter for it. And I still strongly advocate for the CPC. I'm not a fan of the patent system, but categorizing hardware has been done, and it would be very tedious to come up with an alternative system. It can be made more user-friendly, searching through that, but I think like some text like medical devices and so on already existent, I believe. Then to the Hardware X partnership, Hardware X is, and I don't know if everyone, but at least to some extent aware of Open Know-how. So there's even an episode at Hardware X, the podcast, on that. I don't know if it makes sense to reach out to your peers in that, but I believe that this makes sense after we have a sort of stable instance running of the search engine. So then we can also demonstrate the value for Hardware X to be sort of compatible to Open Know-how. And the third thing that has been touched upon is what to do with things that are meant to be open but are not in practice by license or lack of license. So I think that goes beyond the scope of open know-how, because we don't only have the legal allowance to gather that data and share it if it's open. I think there's also something like being a general search engine and being able to show this has been shared but without a license, but I don't think that should be a way we should go. Yet, if that the approach has been as a project is interesting in some regard, we just open an issue saying, hey, there's a license missing. Why don't you add this or such license that should work for you? And this works pretty well yet, but of course that's an individual targeted approach. I think in general that's part of a larger cultural shift also in science.
Yeah, it takes a community on that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments, feedback for the team?
There are a few questions in the chat still that are not answered. I don't know, Robin, if you find time to look through. If we don't manage to answer all of them, I would suggest we add them to the community forum page of this call. Would be nice to just get an entry there, because I'm pretty sure there will be more questions, and it's good for us to collect them for an FAQ. Yeah. So
I can share them with you from the Zoom call after the chat, after the call. Well, if there's no further live questions, I want to echo the comment that Robert has just made, that it's very nice to see it live. I know from the inside of the project, they were hoping that the user interface work would be further ahead by today than it has been, but that's always the case as you move towards the end of a project. And I do hope to have another community call once the project is actually completed, so to focus on a bit of that user interface, and perhaps there's an opportunity to address some more of the questions and the ideas that have been discussed today. Our community forum is there if you want to make use of it. Some of the links that have been shared in the call today are worth exploring a little bit more, including the sort of the presentation that Robin has made. There's more work happening here. I want to say a big thank you to the team at Open-Source Ecology Germany for their work on this, for really taking open know-how to the next level. And I want to acknowledge the previous work that Casper Emanuel has done on open know-how search, and for platforms like Apropedia as well for their contributions to it, and Helpful Engineering. There's been a lot of people in the Alliance involved in this. So yeah, it's an exciting new phase for open know-how, and thanks to the sponsor for this project as well, Next Generation Internet Search. So that's it for today, and if you have anything else, please do get in touch. And thanks again to the team. Thanks for joining today. Bye, everyone.
thank you as well. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Robin and Peter. Thank you very much. I'm glad to see all this wonderful progress.